Since January 2017, over 30,000 people have illegally crossed the border from the United States into Canada and subsequently claimed asylum. Since that point in time, we've had the mayor of Toronto come out and talk about the fact that Toronto's homeless shelter capacity is way oversubscribed because all of these people have to go somewhere, and there wasn't a plan on how to support their integration into Canada. We've seen the visa requirement on Mexico be lifted without a formal review, and we've seen a lot of asylum claims spike after that point in time. Same thing with Romania. We've seen under Justin Trudeau's immigration minister refusal to deal with the oversight process for the immigration consultants issue. We've seen wait times increase for privately sponsored refugees. I always come to you with all the fails that Justin Trudeau's immigration minister has had over the last couple of years. In fact, it's a full-time job for me just to keep up with the daily fails. One could make a pretty good argument. If my colleague Pierre Poilievre was on here, he'd probably argue with me that Justin Trudeau's immigration minister is probably one of his least performing ministers. And that's kind of a hard bar to have given how badly Bill Morneau as the finance minister has screwed up. But you'd think that if somebody was performing that poorly, what typically happens in that situation? You kind of get fired, right? So when I heard that Justin Trudeau was going to shuffle his cabinet, and that means change the people who occupy the senior ministers or the executive part of his government, I've been speculating for a couple of weeks that his immigration minister was going to be on the chopping block. That said, I was very surprised today to find out this. Are you ready for it? Because it surprised me. Justin Trudeau kept the Minister of Immigration in his job, but created a brand new minister for illegal border crossers. So we now have a Minister of Immigration and a minister for illegal border crossers. So that was the result of the cabinet shuffle today. So instead of Justin Trudeau firing his immigration minister, we now have two immigration ministers, one for illegal border crossers and one for everyone else. So I think that is indicative of a few things. First of all, I don't know why, but Justin Trudeau, I guess he thought he couldn't get rid of this guy who has been, you've watched his exchanges with me on female genital mutilation in committee. You watched him treat new immigration minister in Ontario, Lisa MacLeod, with a big amount of derision in Ontario, or in Winnipeg on Friday. He's pretty confrontational. He's a pretty poor communicator, and clearly he hasn't been able to manage the file. So yet what Justin Trudeau has done is he's rewarded this behavior by taking away the illegal border crosser component of his job and hiring an expensive minister with a department and a deputy minister and everything just to deal with illegal border crossers. But to me, that also says that Justin Trudeau has made a policy decision. The situation at Roxham Road is one that he has made a decision is going to be permanent, because he's creating a permanent bureaucracy around it. There's a bureaucracy, there's permanent structures at Roxham Road, there is a tent city at Roxham Road, there are buses that people get onto to be shipped to homeless shelters and places around the country. This is a permanent bureaucracy, and now we have a minister in charge of the permanent bureaucracy. So Justin Trudeau has made a permanent policy decision to allow or to normalize high volumes of people using the loophole in the Safe Third Country Agreement to illegally cross the border and claim asylum. Now, I think that is a problem for many of the reasons I've outlined before with you. We should be prioritizing the world's most vulnerable, and certainly, at the very least, I don't agree with Justin Trudeau not seeking to close the loophole, but park that for a second. We now have over 30,000 people in this country who have entered this way in a very short period of time. How is Justin Trudeau going to pay for this, right? What are we going to do about the hundreds of people who are in college dormitories in Toronto that are about to be evicted in a few weeks' time? This is, of course, why I'm calling these emergency parliamentary meetings this summer. This is why I'm in Ottawa instead of Calgary right now, because we need to get answers on this. So, look, I'm a little surprised. I really thought Justin Trudeau was going to do the right thing and put somebody with a little bit more competency in the file. But what we have today is a typical Liberal move, right? So rather than sort of being strong and saying, hey, you didn't get the job done, sorry, we're going to put someone else in your job, he just hired somebody else but is still paying the other guy. Anyway, that's what happened in today's cabinet shuffle. I want to give you one more thing, though. I had an interview this afternoon, and the media angle on this was that the new guy that Justin Trudeau hired to be this new minister for illegal border crossers, he actually, his name is Bill Blair, and the way that the media is framing this is so that Bill Blair and Premier Doug Ford could be adversarial. That's not productive. I mean, you can be of different political parties and not like each other, but still respect each other enough to get something done, especially something as important as, coming up with a budgetary plan or a legislative plan to manage the crisis at Roxham Road. And one of the interviews that I had today, I was asked, well, Doug Ford's been very, aggressive with the government on this. Well, no, Doug Ford and his immigration minister have just been asking some basic questions like, hey, it costs the province of Ontario $90 million in welfare payments this year to deal with your decision to allow the Roxham Road crisis to continue without seeking to close the loophole in the Safe Third Country Agreement. Ontario is pretty close to being broke. How are we going to pay for this? How is the federal government going to do this, given that it's a policy decision that we're being made? And also, hey, our homeless shelters are at capacity. How are we going to deal with this? Those seems like pretty reasonable questions. And I mean, you don't have to agree with each other politically, but I mean, you have to put yourself in the shoes of these people that are in these college dormitories about to be evicted and say, maybe we should come up with a plan. And also, to you, Canadian taxpayers, we have to be accountable for how we're spending your money. And I think it's very reasonable for provincial governments to say, is it reasonable for us to offload the costs, or the federal government to offload the costs of a major immigration policy decision? That's not, the term I used was knock'em sock'em robots. That's really being a legislator and standing up and doing your job by asking how we're spending taxpayer money. The last point I made on this was that you remember a few months ago the Quebec government came out, and I think the word that they used, they called the federal government's response to the Roxham Road crisis disastrous. And of course, the Prime Minister decided to write I think it was close to $200 million check to the Quebec government. And no one was talking about Bill Blair versus Quebec government at that point in time, and I'm glad they weren't, because that's not the way to manage a federation like Canada. We shouldn't be seeking to create divisions between the federal government and the province. In fact, we should be trying to have better relationships. And even if you don't agree politically with someone, you would think that you would be trying to build some bridges. And I was kind of disappointed to watch Justin Trudeau and Bill Blair today use some pretty amped up language around, because, asking these questions apparently means that you're a fearmonger, or that you are un-Canadian, or dealing with the politics of fear. And I think what we're dealing with is our responsibility to be compassionate and care for people when we invite them to Canada, while maintaining a strong framework in which we are spending your money. Because there's a lot of opportunity cost to your money. Every time we spend $1 billion on something, that means that we're not spending it on something else, or we're going into deficit. And Trudeau's had to raise your taxes while he's gone into deficit. So these are reasonable questions to be asked. So it's a very interesting day. Rather than closing the loophole in the Safe Third Country Agreement, rather than working with provinces, Justin Trudeau has elected to keep his immigration minister that oversaw this problem in his job, paying him, to hire someone else to be the Minister of Illegal Border Crossers, and then, of course, tried to get into a war with the government of Ontario today, and also failed to answer any of the questions that we have been raising for 1.5 years. That's not good government. That's pretty brutal. Working hard for you in Ottawa. Have a great day.